Okay, good night, good night, good night, good night. Welcome, welcome, welcome to Fatherhood Talks, your weekly Fatherhood Think Tank. I know last week, that's what happens when you give people a time off to get their Valentines and their hugs and kisses. Then they lose track. And some people must still be on, or they might still be celebrating President's Day. I know somebody told me that they had President's Day off and they took the day off too. And I said, wow, how about you? But I want to welcome you all again to another episode of Fatherhood Talks, where, we have 24/7 dads talking about issues that affect the community, affect family, and affect mainly themselves. And so tonight's topic is G code. Somebody probably, if you got this message on my Instagram, the music that went along with this was the G thing. So I know you might have just been saying, wow, this is what G code, what's this G code thing? And we're gonna talk about what the G code is. We're gonna break that down in tonight's conversation. But I just want to welcome you. If you are seeing this for the first time, you plan on wondering how, one thing I say is like, share, subscribe, hit the bell so you can get notifications when we're going to have these live fatherhood talks. And then also, if you're in the Fort Lauderdale area, tomorrow we will be having a live meeting, one that we haven't had in almost, it'll be over 3 years since the last time we had a live meeting. We had some get-togethers, but not a live meeting. And we got a lot in store planned for that tomorrow. So I look forward to seeing the fathers that come out to that tomorrow. It's going to be nothing like we used to have. Maybe we might even go back to what we had way back at Carter Park. Some of the stuff we used to do way back at Carter Park, but it's going to be something really nice tomorrow. But with that being said, I'm Ron Osborne Williams. I'm the maestro, the Richard Pryor behind the curtain. If you know that, you know what that means. If you don't worry about it. You go look at the Wiz and you'll get it. We're gonna get started with this tonight. Let the fathers introduce themselves, and then we're gonna get in our conversation. G code.
Okay, I guess I'll start off. Good evening, everybody. I'm Larry Jordan. I'm one of the old heads of the group. Pleasure to be here tonight. Hope everyone had a great Valentine's Day, and that you got what you really want.
Hey, good evening, gentlemen. My name is Lionel Lightborn. I'm father to a tribe of 7 young adults now, all of them young adults now, 4 young men, 3 young women, and 1 granddaughter. So it's always a pleasure to be here.
Frederick Adams, father of 3, 1 grandson.
Kevin Miles, father of 3, no grandkids at the time. All of mine are in college bound.
Bert Guzman, father of 2, an adult young lady and a teenage lady as well. Pleasure to be here. First time. Glad to be here.
Welcome.
Well, John Alexander Ramirez, father of 2, 7-year-old, 3-year-old. Just happy to be in this room. Thank you.
All right. So with that, everybody, is that everybody?
Mr. Osborne, quick question. Are everyone on this live, are they of the Omega Psi Phi Fraternity Incorporated? Or we have
just fathers. Only thing we on here is fathers.
Okay.
Yeah.
No, I just was curious.
Oh yeah. But there are some brothers on here. We got all kinds of brothers on here. They say you got the wine brothers on.
Okay, okay. All right.
So G code. What is G code? What I mean, you know, I see some real G's out here, so I probably want to ask them first. And I have an idea when I think about being a G, and I think about how that relates to being a father. The first thing I think about is my grandfather. Is he the first person I think about? I think about my grandfather, and because he was a G. And I know G, you know, we use this idea that G represents gangster, but there's a little bit more to being a G than being a gangster, I think. If we understand in our culture, in our world, being a G, that's like being a good guy, good stand-up. He's a stand-up guy. He's the kind of person get things done and take care of business. So as I think about that, then I did think about my own dad, who is, as I call him now, the OG, because that's the way he rolled. He rolled smooth, but in both of those men, I even take it over to my stepdad, because he a real G. So I just think of the different kinds of G's that I know as men who have poured into me and has kind of influenced the kind of man that I am and the kind of father that I am. Thinking about them, it is interesting that we're going to have this conversation about the G code and what does that mean and how that establishes itself in fatherhood. So I just wanted to open that up, just say when I thought about this topic and I wrote it down, I said, wow, G code. I know that and I just want you to know that one of the big parts about our program, what we have here in this collaborator of fathers, is that I don't come up with these titles. What happens is the collaboratives sends in topics, and we just put them in the pot, stir them up, and then bring them to you. So you know, so I can't wait to hear the mindset of how the fathers who might have decided to have this topic, what they're thinking and how they putting in the G code. But I have my own mind, thought about these fathers figures that I've had and how they represented in my mind what a G code was. And a G code has something out, but I want to wait before I say what it is, because I want to see if I like to, like, you know, I'm a scientist, so I like to pacify that it's going to be what I thought it was. So I'm gonna let everybody else, and then I'll come back, and then hopefully, if it's not, I present what I think it was. Go ahead, gentlemen. It's open. It's open. What's the G code to you? How do you relate it to fatherhood? What's G coding mean to you?
Well, I think the G code has evolved, has a lot of nuances, and it has taken on a life of its own, even in the technological realm, right? Because you'll find out that the G code actually exists in technology, and that's a code that they actually use for a specific type of programming. But then again, the other G code is back to the reference you're talking about, the gangster code, which is, and this is what I think we can learn a lot from the G code as it in the gangster sense of it. The G code in the gangster sense is a group of people, a group, organization that said they're not going to be systemically driven. And so they're not gonna depend on law enforcement or a particular justice system. And they created a system within themselves, within the origins of who they were. You understand? And so with the G code, I mean, and particularly as African Americans, we can learn so much from that, because to create your own, what they call it, your own parallel universe, right? And as a G code, they created their own parallel universe. As I think when it started as early back as in the old, and I forgot the legitimate name for the mafia, but it started way back from when they left the origins of their country. You understand? So look at the origins of their country. The G code was actually created from their origins, or better yet, here goes another G code word: geographic or geographic, right? And so G code can actually be the origins of your geography, of where you are originally from, if you want to put the OG status together. But with that, the G code saying, I think what I learned from the G code is the fact that it says we're not going to be system minded. We're not going to be systemically driven. And it's saying that we have to create our own parallel universe if we are to not only survive, but to actually thrive as the origins of where we're geographically from. If I'm going to put some science behind it, particularly African-American science. But urban, just from an urban standpoint, the G code is still the same thing. And that's you living by whatever particular code or environment that you exist in. And so if that G code has the rules of not snitching, then you have to live by that particular code. If the G code has rules about you taking care of your children and not and always taking care of your family, then you got to live by that. If the G code put a command or a demand on you being a provider and a protector, then you have to live by that. So the G code is in a nutshell a particular set of governance and discipline that men decide they want to live by. And it's not always a negative thing. And so I just wanted to share that particular aspect, but there's so many different ideas going on in my head. I'll give somebody else another chance.
Are we all being shot at? Light boy. I have to say that the G code, I think it was the Costa Nostra that came from the Italians, right? When we talk about the Italian mafia and all of that. In my countries, I guess you would call it the cartels, right? The syndicates. But it really just comes down with people protecting themselves. It gets started from the neighborhoods or the community against the police or the guerrillas or whatever oppressors are against you at the time. And it just becomes a neighborhood thing. It reminds me of a conversation we were having in this room a couple of weeks ago about, well, you talk white. No, you talk educated, right? And how it could put you in a situation because you ain't from the neighborhood or you ain't to be trusted, right? And so when I hear G code, and kind of going off of what you were saying, like, well, that's what comes to mind to me is you have to learn to assimilate in the sense to be protected, to be incubated by your fellow peers that you grew up with, right? If you decide to move geographically or go somewhere else. Good night, boys. Excuse me for a second.
See, that's what listen, that's real. One thing we established here, and I think even when we used to have our live meet, people would be like, hey, what's going on? What y'all got popping? And I say, well, people bring their kids, their wives to the meetings, and it because that's a part of being a G. That's part of being a father. You can't just say I'm gonna do this and do that. Actually have to do some things and be in that place. So that's where that's at. Let's Brother Joy, bring some of that old G style in there so we can see.
Oh man. Okay, G code. Well, that's the old gangster code, and basically it I know with me, it started in the neighborhood, and basically where the neighborhood had a set of rules, and based on your neighborhood, the things that you did in your neighborhood, you can only go so far. You in your neighborhood, you protected the people that were in your neighborhood, and that also it actually started within each family, and that was the most important thing, and your family rules, basically, like I was always taught, you're a Jordan, and this is how Jordans act, this is what Jordans do, this is how they do it, and these are things that you will not do based on the way that the family does things. So for me, that's the way things were within the neighborhood. Things have changed, and of course, as it used to be, as Lionel said, it takes a village. And that's basically what the code was. And those were the village rules. And if you didn't follow the village rules, you would be severely reprimanded by several different people. And anyone that was in authority had the right to bring the discipline. It didn't just have to be, your parents. It could be your brothers or sisters. It could be your teachers. It could be, whatever it was. But it was just within it. There was just a set of rules that you needed to follow.
You know what I like what Larry said, excuse me, Ron, because he said something that hit hard for me. Not even so much hard for me, but it just brought up another G. And the more we talk about this, all these different G's coming up. And what he's talking about is genealogy. You understand? Which, and he said it started with his family, so he represents his family. And when you out there, which is true, especially within our culture. Because yeah, you was from a particular set of family, and each family name carried a certain reputation with it. See? And so you could have been from an educated family, you could have been from a well-to-do family, and you could have been from a very well roughneck family who all coexisted cohesively, right? Cohesively in our community historically. And so this is what I love about this conversation. It's like an onion. It's going to evolve. And I love the fact that you brought that point up, Larry. So thank you.
Lionel, it also goes into, and I know you was, originally was talking about the mob and the gangsters and this idea of a code they had. But also when you think of, and again, this is what we understand based on media and what people have showed us about the mafia and their codes and how they handle things. They did have certain codes that, and I never forget it because it was one of my favorite scenes in the movie. It's also one of my favorite scenes in Ashante's video, where Terrence Howard, he's at a house, and just like Ray Liotta's at the house of the side chick, living it up. And he's not at his home with his wife and his kids. And the mobster guys show up to the door and say, it's time to go home. It's time to go home. And so that whole pinpoint and discussion of there's a code as you as a man, there's a code as you as a father, there's a code as you that you must follow to be in this group of people. We don't do certain things. You must do these things. And we're going to hold you accountable to doing them. And if you don't, we'll call you to come to a party where that'll be your last party. That's kind of radical kind of sense of what the kind of things that holding people to that mindset. But sometimes you got to have consequences to be held to that kind of mindset. So I as I think and look at that, one of the first things I say is there are so many different subsystems that we put ourselves into to make codes. And I bring it back to what I initially thought you was going to say when you started talking about the G code, Lionel, is to be able to finesse. I'm never going to let that go. The finesse, because I realize that finesse is so important in fatherhood. And we may not realize because initially the perception of us is to be a provider, a disciplinarian, a protector, a lot of things that doesn't have anything to do with negotiation, are being cooperative, it's dictating what I want to happen. When you got to finesse, you got to say, yeah, you can go to the football game, but you got to walk to it. So I finesse for you to definitely be able to go to the football game, but now I put a finesse in there, yes, but you're gonna have to walk. And kids today, they probably say, I ain't going to a football game, I gotta walk, man. They don't like to walk nowhere. So you find ways to finesse situation instead of just being strong-armed, as we know that has been the social construction for fathers a lot of times, to be the dictator leader and find a new way to lead. I remember when I was in college, when I was in a leadership position, and you would think that when we was in the band director told the drum majors, we never ate first. we never did anything first. We did everything last, and except lead the band. And so it came to a point that one day he called us and said, "Do y'all know why y'all never do anything last? Because leaders make sure everybody else is fine and okay before they do anything. Because else people would think that you're a dictator, not a leader. You know, you make sure my family eat good, make sure all that." And that goes some conflict into like who, you know, that old saying, who get the plate first in the house? You know, do the mom feed the kids or do they feed the dad? Or, you know, I say, why can't everybody get fed all at the same time? The food on the table, let's dig in. You know, put the food on the table, let's dig in. Everybody go all together, you know. But
At my house, my dad always got the biggest bowl. It was the biggest bowl was his. My apologies for having to walk away early. Actually, no, that's fatherhood. Like, it's just what it was. They wanted to say goodnight. But in my house, it was the biggest bowl was my dad's.
Yeah. I know at my house, nobody ate until my dad came home and he had to get the first plate. Everybody else had to wait. Everybody else, that was just the code, you know. But I think something, I tell you what I find interesting is that usually the G code, whatever you wanted to call it, always seemed to be dominant in how we acted. And when you talked about that code, what I actually thought about were the police that recently killed this young man. Now they were operating under a code, you know, what we call it, a blue code or whatever it is. But it's funny how I think that back in the day, you're the way you were brought up, and your code would preempt even a blue code and say, "Listen, I know y'all want to do that, but I'm not doing that." So because there were always several different codes that we had to, you know, there were codes that where you worked, there were codes when you went to school, there was codes when you was home, there was codes when you went out, there's codes, you know, but it was always an overarching general code that you need to know how to act. And one of those was moral responsibility. And we were always taught, I don't care what house you came, they said, "Boy, you want to go to heaven, don't you better act right." You know, and so you don't do those kind of things just morally, you know. And I think that a lot of these days our codes lack the morality that they used to, and now people like, "Oh, I just did it." They're like, we got to the point where if it feels good, do it. You know, if you like to do it, or if you want to do it, you feel it's in your rights to do it, then you can do it. And now the coach used to say, "Listen, there are things that I wanted to do, but I didn't do it because I knew what the code was." You know, but I just find it interesting that those four gentlemen violated that code, their own moral code, and I'm sure they were brought up to act right, you know, to act in a certain type of way. So I find that interesting that they violate just to go with the blue code for whatever reason they did.
That's a really good point, Larry. The idea that as fathers, we may violate one code to go with another code. And how do we kind of manage those intersections of codes? Like, you know, I want to, you know, I'm bring a topic. I know that sometimes one topic, sometimes people be like, some people have a code about sexuality and identity, right? They have a code about it. And then that question comes, how does that code relate to your code of loving your children? Your children identify, they have a different expression or identity. They have their own identity in those things. But then you turn around and say, well, my code is I got to love and protect my children. And where does that conflict when that goes against some of what you might feel is your code? We see a lot of fathers and a lot of mothers. I won't just say father. I say mothers a lot more, because a lot of people, you know, we know that many kids who come are even not even kids, but just people who decide to live different lives immediately the code for some people is like, I don't deal with you, I can't deal with you, I won't deal with you. And I, you know, that's one, and I use this as an example because I think it's one that's the most prevalent I can think of that fathers may face sometimes. And I know that, and I say that because I know a lot of fathers just facing the idea of having to change the words or the pronouns that their kids, friends, even their kids are impressing upon them. And that's somebody said, what I'm talking about, if you don't know about it, you'll find out soon enough. Where you supposed to call, you know, you might say, hey, somebody, a he or she, and they say, no, I'm a they, and then you say, huh? Well, there's only one of you. So, but understand that this is how they identify themselves. This is what they want to be. And so the question then becomes, hey, that goes against my code, but they have their code that they're going through. And how do we intercept those codes? And I think finding out what code trumps all other codes. And that brings me almost to a point when as we've been talking, I keep seeing the word G, the letter G, and it just makes me think about God. I don't know why, but God code. And so I'm gonna do one of those. As I seen it and I thought it, I know once I said it, I'm gonna just, you know, pass the ball, Steph Curry, over to the one who's gonna slam dunk it, because I already know.
Well, what you're talking about, but then again, you bring up another G. So, and I'm glad again we're talking about G codes. So we discovering all these different topics when it comes to G. You're talking about gender code, and you got to understand that when it comes to the G code, you can't overlook the guy code. Now we know what the guy code is because guys don't cry. I mean, if I just put it out there, we could say a million things what guys don't do or what guys do. You understand? Guys don't cry. Guys don't do this. Guys don't do that. So way before gay people had their codes, guys already, I think we mastered the gender code because we had the G code was, again, with the gangster code, but it was actually birthed out of the guy code. You understand? Because the gangster code is a set of rules which specifically is specific to men. You never, even though girls start with a G as well, but it was specifically made by men for men. You understand? So when you talk to the topic of gender, I think everybody mimics what actually originally started with men. And that's the privilege of being a man, is because we had to the rights and the responsibilities. And notice I said the rights and the responsibilities, because I don't want people to think that you can just have rights without responsibility. No, you have rights and responsibilities to always look at the bigger picture when you're making every decision, which is one of the fundamental things of the G code. And so there's a set of rules and principles that you have to think about the totality of the decision that you're making, which means it has to affect more than you, and it has to affect more than yours, right? That's the responsibility of it. And so with that, and particularly when it comes to being a guy, and I think I love one of the gangster movies where I think it was it was The Godfather. He was telling Michael, Don Corleone was telling Michael Corleone, he said, you know what? Women and children can be careless, but men can't. You see the difference? And so this is the type of the man and type of pressure that the G code brings when it comes to particularly being a man, because it's saying you got to be at any moment willing to give your life for this. And that's where the rubber meets the road for most people. Because a lot of people want to have the rights, but nobody really wants the responsibility. Because when it's time to give your life or your freedom for it, where you are now. You understand? And that's specifically not saying that women, and I think children shouldn't have to give their life for anything, which is going back to your point, Ron. Because if we're going to be the protectors and the providers of our children, we're going to have to make a lot of decisions and calls that goes beyond them and beyond their now. That's the responsibility of it. And so I'm like, if I'm thinking beyond your mom, yes, I can respect your freedom of expression. You understand? And I can expect your experience, but I need you to know that your experience and your expressions can change over time, and they normally do, being a human being. But I can't lock you into something, right, that you can't get yourself out of later on. Or you may not have the right to change your mind later on. You understand? And so I think oftentimes when it comes to that, particularly that gender discussion, we don't have the whole discussion. You understand? And particularly as men, we got to be willing to be unpopular when it comes to having that whole discussion where I can say, I can respect your right and your right to expression, your right to experience. You understand? But I can also have to respect a greater right, and that's your right to exist. That's all I got to do.
All right, anybody? I mean, the dads, you're here. You have a comment? This is your time, your thoughts. That you know that we have multiple fathers on here, so we definitely want you to be able to share from your mindset of this idea of how you even see this thing called the G code, or maybe that you may not even see a such thing. I think that's one of the great parts about here is that this is not like a kind of lecture where it got to go the way, because we know that not all fathers are monolithic. Some think very differently about different things. It might be for many different reasons. You might think just using the word G code is when some not appropriate. You might say that's inappropriate to use because that's glorifying gangsterness and that's bad for the family. And guess what? I can see that point of view. I can understand that. You know, that's why when I thought about putting on Ain't Nothing But a G thing to advertise the day's show, I said, well, somebody might be saying this man playing Snoop Dogg and Dr. Dre, talking about ain't nothing but a G thing. What does that mean? So I see somebody unclicking.
You know, I just want to say one thing. I think it's particularly important, and especially like Lionel and you mentioned earlier, Ron, about protection of women and children. I think that's where we really dropped the ball in response to our code. Back in the day, there's number one, we protected our women, and we also protected our children from a lot of things that they could not hear. Like it was, how many times did people don't say, now this grown folks business, now you just gone over there into the room back over there. We talk about something you don't even need to hear at all. And that was just protection. It wasn't necessarily I'm giving out authority. I'm just trying to protect. You don't need to hear this right now. You're not ready for this right now. You know, and when it comes to our females, you know, I remember the first time that I heard someone call a female a bitch, and she said, well, if I'm a bitch, your mama a bitch, you know, because I'm a female, you know, your mama a female, you know, you know, and you know, and then that threw them off, you know, that threw them off, you know, but now it's just, we just lost our way when it comes, especially the way that we treat our children in that regard. And just that they're just, oh, it's okay if they hear anything. It's okay, you know, and we just open up way too much for them that their brains really cannot handle at this point, you know, and they, of course, in turn learn about how to treat their females many times, not from us, but from what they have learned on the internet or Instagram or whatever, blah, 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 however that goes these days. I can't even keep up. So I think that the code has really dropped the way that we handle our code is really, we dropped the ball in that regard.
I have to agree with you on that. That's a really good point, because we, in this technological age, believe that everything is okay because the kids can learn it themselves, and almost feel as the parents, we don't need to, it's not dictate what they know, but really be able to discipline them on what they're talking. I'm listening to people talk all the time. And I tell the story, the joke about a dad and the son was sitting down, and they was going through the kid was going to do good on the test. He asked him a couple of the history questions. Had asked him the first one, he did good. Oh man, the son, hey son, you're doing good. He asked him the next question, and the son got it. He said, oh, you're doing, oh man, you're gonna pass it. Then he say, who was the first black president? And the son said, George Floyd. and so And somebody say, well, what? I don't understand. I don't get that. But if you understand you're around kids, you understand how social media and how the mass media works today, that information is first and foremost, and people take that as the gospel when they really need us as their fathers, as their parents, to really explain that information in another context for how it's used and what really understand. The kids see us talking tonight and say, Dad, what's the G code? You let them go and look up what the G code. Now listen, this G code thing, I'm just letting you know, when I went to Google to get a picture for G code got something to do with coding. So it don't got nothing to do with gangster. It was no picture there that had anything smooth. That's why we just got a simple picture saying G code, because everything was interrelated to something about coding. So here we're talking about G coding, and the kids gonna think, oh, G coding, I know all about coding, Dad. But that's not what we're talking about. And it's for us to teach and guide our children these things so they can be know what they're talking about, because they know a lot of stuff, but somebody got to put it in the right place. That's the reason why education and teachers are important, to have that place in the education system. But I think it first starts with us. We can't sit there and think that the teachers, this argument that we got in our state with your buddy, my buddy Ron, or Ron, listen, that shouldn't be, that shouldn't be an issue, because guess what? If you're concerned about what your kids learning, their history, it should be starting with you. I went to the powwow last week. If you know what I'm talking about, you know what I'm talking about. I went to the powwow, bought me this nice bracelet at the powwow. I almost bought so much stuff at the powwow. But guess what? Guess who teaching them, those kids, their history, their ancestors, their parents? Because definitely it's not taught in any public school they go to, not taught anywhere. So they're learning their seminal history from their ancestors and from their home. And so we got to also take the responsibility that don't say, oh, Ron trying to stop something. Forget what Ron stopped. Ron can't stop nothing what you do in your home. When y'all listen to Gucci Man in y'all home, when y'all listen to Project Pat, he ain't there to stop y'all from doing that. So same thing, you can be teaching your child about Langston Hughes, Zellner Hurston. You can teach them all those things yourself. You don't got to worry about them taking the books out, because you got the books in your house. Okay, let me get off the pedestal. Let me get off the.
But you know what, Ron? You and LJ spoke about something. Y'all hit on another G. And again, we just coming across all these nuances of just the G code. You guys talking about LJ started out with rated G, right? Which is general admission, when he spoke about children not being able to be around for certain discussions. Children can be around for rated G discussions, because those discussions are for the general public. That means they can, which ties into your point, Ron, which means that everybody can be educated from that discussion, and that particular discussion can empower or entertain everybody. But then you got the other rated G, or the rated G code, which is back to your point, Ron, which is guidance. You understand? And which y'all are ping pong, y'all kind of ping ponging with these particular G's, because he ping pong to you, you ping pong back to him with the guidance on how we should guide our children when it comes to the nuances of the very original geographic or geography that they're from. You understand? So now I'm going to tell you something, and I'm going to say this, and I always, when it comes to my affluent, talented, 10 educated brothers and sisters, I'm like, listen, being intelligent don't give you no right to be boring. Being intelligent don't give you no right to not be engaging. And so if you think that you're too intelligent enough to meet people where they are, and too often our leadership are conditioned for people to serve them, and they're not serving anyone. And so we die within the systems that we created. Not that we created for ourselves, that people created for us. And we peak at our titles. And so that's what the G code is diametrically against. You understand? And I mean completely against it, because nothing should separate you from the origins of you. And so with that, this G code again, it's going to evolve even more. I just want to hear more what they call perspectives, and don't be afraid to share your perspective, because we can only be empowered when we empower each other. So you got to say something, even if you don't think it's worthy enough to be said. Say it anyway. So please, I'm dying to hear from some of the other brothers on here.
He's dying, folks. I don't know if you guys can speak. I know you're there. If y'all can speak.
With the
Go ahead, Fred.
the G code. G code for me is wisdom for the elder guys that that talk to young guys about, you know, life experience, some experience that they went through. And sometimes they pass some of the knowledge down from, like a library, you know, they pass the knowledge down to younger generations, you know, but it's up to the younger generation to cope with it. But, you know, you still have to go through it, if you understand what I'm saying.
Absolutely. That's right on point. That the G code is that, hey, come, we on the block, we the OGs, and you can learn what you need to learn from us, type of thing. I love that. Yeah. I mean, I think that's a part of what we do here. The F code.
Yeah. That's why I like this group. You know what I mean? I don't say too much. I have background. We watch my grandson and everything. I got all the noise. All right. You want my attention. So, you know, I just sit back and listen.
Right. All right. I see my man Donald there. Donald, I don't know if you can talk. Jay.
I ain't see Donald in a minute. Donald, what happened to you, man?
I've been working, man. I'm sorry. Hey guys, how y'all doing? Just to introduce myself real quick. Donald Jones, divorced and father of two. I have a 13-year-old young lady and a 12-year-old man. But to get back to context, I missed y'all guys too. What's up, Pastor? How you doing, bro? Hey Ryan, how you doing? My lady says hello to all you guys because we all missed y'all. It's just I've been working the evening shift at a time, but switching jobs this time, going to Atlanta Airport. And I wasn't able to do it because I was so freaking busy and wasn't able to keep up with my time. So I do apologize for that, but trust and believe I missed y'all and I've been mentoring people as I go.
Well, hey, you don't gotta apologize to us to make doing your life, man. Hey, we just know you out there soldiering like you need to. I know that you ain't gonna never let fatherhood go by the wayside. You're gonna make sure, look, out there working is doing exactly that same thing, my brother. Just trying to be, look, I want to say something that people may not even recognize, and that is important. When this brother came, he spoke, he said, well, my lady said hi, my kids is good, and I've been working. Listen, shit, that's all we need to hear. Ain't nothing, I don't think it's nothing that you can say other than that, but we know that everything good at that point. And I know you're doing good. Again, I was waiting for you to get on here because I know the good things and the great and being able to move the way you've been able to move and do the things you've been able to do. Man, I'm just, even though I haven't seen you, I've been so proud to know you've been able to kind of do the things you need to do and move some things around in your life like that. So I'm glad to hear and glad you was able to come on here tonight, Donald. So, hey, man, what you got to say about the G code, Donald? Anything?
What Donald already said it. He brought up another G, Ronald. You want to hear what G code is?
Go ahead.
He just explained it.
Lightboard is a G counter.
Right? Yeah, you know, he brought it there. You know what Donald just explained? Donald just basically said, I've been out there grinding. Another G code.
Amen. And thank you.
So, man, it's a pleasure to see you back in the fold, Donald. Thank God for you. I don't think we saw you in the new year, so happy new year and all that other good stuff. And congratulations on the transition to Atlanta.
Thank you very much, Lionel. I appreciate that. You too, Coach Ryan.
Yeah. All right, so let's get back. What? Hey, any other people down there with some G codes? Don't dismay. We got what, about 30 minutes to kind of G code it out. And guess what? Let me say that there may be something that may not be G codish that you just might want to even kind of like, you know, bust out. If not, I'm definitely going to be advertising for people in the greater South Florida area by tomorrow night, we got a really good comeback program set up for you at the Arts Craft Hollywood Center in Hollywood, Florida. Definitely, we starting at 6 o'clock. We'll have a nice dinner sponsored by Tom Jenkins. That might gonna get people probably running there just on that. Tom Jenkins. See, look at Larry licking his lips already. But I'm so excited about tomorrow because it is like a grand opening for us to be together again in person and do this face to face and feel each other's energy. We do this every week, and I think that's a big. It has power every week. But I think when we get into a room together and really work on the goal of fatherhood in the same space, the same time, it has such synergy that we're going to be able to kind of like push out and just feel better, just feel more relaxed. And so I welcome people again tomorrow to come out. What's the address again, Castro?
Give me 1 second. The Art Center of Hollywood is 1650 Harrison Street, Hollywood, Florida 33020.
And we're starting at 6 o'clock. Listen, we starting at 6 o'clock. We'll be starting with dinner. No, you slide up in there 7 o'clock. Won't be nothing but bones and bones. I'm telling you, be nothing but bones left in there because that's how I roll. So don't say no. Listen, if you ain't there, early bird gonna get the worm, and if you late, you just gonna get the knowledge.
Especially if I'm there, I don't look like this for nothing.
You know that it is one of these things where, you know, when we do this every week, I think that, you know, I'm gonna tell you something. It was odd. I'm gonna say this. It was very strange for me last week. It was strange. It was something, and I guess I never really understand this idea. And one of the things that happened is that it wasn't since I was a young kid and I had to get up every morning and go to church on Sunday. When I was a young kid and we had to go, and we didn't have to just go to church, we had to go and walk and be there to Sunday school. We had to be there at Sunday school early in the morning in Sunday school. And I just understand why. We used to eat before we left because somebody was up early cooking breakfast at the big house. And we would walk down to Sunday school. And I would be like, man, we about to be here all day. You know, with the Sunday school, then after Sunday school, going to the regular church service. Then after church service, we go home, be some food to eat. Then we got to go back for YSP. I forget, I think it's YSP. If you're in AME church, you know what I'm talking about. Go to YSP in the afternoon, and then after that, do the evening service. That's your whole day on Sunday. I remember those days, and I related so much to that commitment of having to do that. It's almost the same commitment I have now. The father, it's like, you know, people say, "What you got going on?" Well, I got Tuesday night, I'm busy. Wednesday night, I'm busy. Jack. I'm just busy those times, and these are things that we got going on. These are things that's happening. And it's almost a part when I miss it. I feel like I'm missing something. I missed something. It's something that, and I don't know what that is. I don't know how to describe that. It's almost like something that keeps you going, keeps you being able to go in the world, because I think you need that. You need that today. I think one of the things we learned that people in our society need connections and organizations, but they need ones that's positive towards the goals that they're trying to achieve. I'm just trying to achieve the goal to be the best man and father I can be under the circumstances that I'm in. And the only way you can do that is to be around other men and fathers who you can bounce these ideas, these thoughts, these feelings, these things that, you know, is going on with you, and say, well, I don't feel like I'm the worst. I don't feel like I'm the best. I feel like I just belong. And that's an important part, because when you belong, you can then lead others. Now, most people don't understand that. When I feel like I belong to a group of men who not only that I belong to them, but I'm also accountable to them. I'm accountable for what things I do, what I say, what might happen. You know, I can't go out here and do something tomorrow, because guess what? I got to come back and I have to answer to our G code that we have here in fatherhood. Say, man, how you go out there and do that? You might understand it, but then I know I got to answer to it. Can't just say, man, F y'all, it don't matter, do that. I want to do y'all, but because that's not the reality. I owe the group code something. You owe the group something, because the first thing I was listening to this special, and the man was saying, when somebody do something in an organization, it's never the person, it's always the organization first. So if you go to Liberty City High School, they're not gonna say Johnny John who went to Liberty City High School. They don't say Liberty High School student, and then in parentheses they're gonna have John John. So Liberty City High School is the one that, again, I know, again, folks, there's no such thing as Liberty City High School. I'm just using that as, I don't want y'all going out here say this man think it's a Liberty City High School. I know it's not. I didn't want to downgrade anybody's school or say anything. I just, use those things. And so that's something to think about, the strength of when we have these, what I would call then again, this group code that comes into play when you're part of a group and what you're responsible for and what you're responsible to be accountable for. Because one of the things I keep saying that is the failure for a lot of us and fathers today is that we're not being held accountable. And what I mean by being held accountable is that not that we're not, somebody saying something, we're not responsible, is that the accountability to give us the opportunity to do things that we need to do, people are doing it and saying they don't need us to do it. And it's like that destroys kind of how our DNA is made up. We're made up to be providers. So if you say, I don't need no man, I don't need you to do anything, well, I really want to do it, but if I can't do it, I won't do it, and I'll use my energy elsewhere. When really those energies really should go into the accountability, being accountable, and being able to be accountable, not to somebody hold you accountable, to be able to be accountable. We don't even have places to be accountable to, because someone already said I could take care of it and do it myself. I don't need you to take care of it. And if I can't take care of it, then I'm almost losing some of my manhood at some point. You can take care of yourself.
I'm glad you said that. You spoke about something earlier, and I would never. I guess I would be remiss, because I always wanted to say that I would be remiss. I'd be remiss. Well, I would be remiss.
You're on mute. You're on mute.
I got it. I'm sorry. So every G code is built, to your original point, Ron, I would say even that the best for last is the God code. Because every G code subscribes to the God code, because every G code aspires to have a divine order, right? And if you're going to put yourself or aspire to be anything, it should be like God. You can trace it back to the mafias. They hold like the greatest covenants, like the high covenants. The highest covenant you got is salvation, for me. I'm just talking about for me. And that's the highest order covenant that you do have, because that's when God gave his son, being Jesus Christ. And then the second covenant right behind that, and this is what the mafia, or La Costa Nostra, as my John Castro so eloquently brought back to my memory, said. The second thing they hold high is marriage, which actually is the second covenant, greatest covenant on earth, salvation, then marriage. And so they hold those things, they reckless when it comes to man. So man relationships, they're gonna govern with each other. But when it comes to those godly relationships, they built their order based on those godly relationships. This is why you see them do the crucifix and then they shoot each other up, which is like an oxymoron. But they're saying the order is more important than the individual himself. And anybody goes against that order, you understand, is worthy of death, which is some real Old Testament stuff. Because if you understand, and this is why it's very important, and I'm glad our parents did take us to church, but at some point, a man gonna have to go back to church and learn from for himself. You understand? Because our parents took us to school. But when we became men, we saw the importance of going back to school ourselves. So the same thing works for church. When you understand the order, and I think one of the greatest presidents, not one of the greatest presidents, but he's among the greatest presidents, one of the greatest presidents in this country ever had, was Theodore Roosevelt, when he stated that a thorough study of the Bible is worth more than a college education. And so with that, I'm like, you got to understand the origins of what this society, or the moral code of this society. This is why you got the religious right, who are often wrong most of the damn time. You understand? And the reason they can be wrong most of the time is because nobody really, and back to your point, are accountable to the very study, right? Or the very topic of spirituality in which this country is, and I'm talking about the Constitution itself and the origins of the Constitution is built on. And I'm like, so if you're going to study the Constitution, you maybe need to do some Bible study in 10 and have both books. You understand? So you can understand there's something and get a revelation, there's something that supersedes the Constitution, or what the Constitution may have something that's deeper within it that only you can see. You understand? And bring that revelation out, which is what Martin Luther King eloquently did, because he knew both. He knew the Constitution and he knew that Bible. And so this is the way he was able to navigate the way he did. And I'm talking about in half the levels of success that he did, not only Martin Luther King, Harriet Tubman, and also Frederick Douglass. You understand? And so when it comes to the origins of our particular culture, it's got to be more than singing Negro spirituals. You better understand the origins and the education of those very spiritual, because it's more than a song, it's a science and it's a study. And we've been going leaps and bounds, getting ready to head towards almost close to 100 years of Black history, the origins of Black History Months being just an acknowledgement or creation or the origins of it, which it was called, I think it was called something Negro Week or something like that back in the days. I don't know the full, but I the origins of it to have this conversation. And so when it comes to that, we got to study all of it as opposed to trying to compete in studying. Oh, the pastors competing against the teachers, and the teachers are competing against the parents. And we got to get out of that nuance and come up with a more universal science and to what it means to be us. I think that's it. Ain't nothing else came out.
I definitely agree with you there. And speaking about accountability, and especially Ron DeSantis, I think that what they're doing is basically a masquerade. And to me, this is a masquerade. It's kind of like, if I cover my eyes, then you won't see me. You know? And what I mean by that is that if I don't recognize your contribution to history, okay, by coming up with things like, listen, I don't know anyone who owned slaves, and I don't ever met anyone that was a slave, okay? The problem with that is that you don't want to give back what you have earned because of those slaves. And so basically you're saying, okay, I don't want to know about the history, because if I'm confronted to the point that I have to give all my corporations back, and I have to give that money back, and I have to give reparations, and now your reparations are worth $13 trillion. Okay, that's what I don't want to give back.
Right.
And because I don't want to give that back, I'm not going to recognize anything at all. And that's the problem. And if that was the case, then basically, then you might as well give back Arizona, Texas, South Dakota, North Dakota back to Mexico. Okay, because you took that from them too. You know, so it's like I'm just not gonna recognize any of this history because I don't want to have to give back. I always say to myself, I'd be a piss poor businessman if I had 400 years of free labor and couldn't be successful. Can you imagine that you ain't have to pay nobody to work for you? You made all the money, they did all the work, and you end up not being a success. You'd be a piss poor businessman.
Like Larry, there were actual Eastern businessmen who that was their biggest gripe. So when we argue, even historically, oh, what was the Civil War about? Civil War was about exactly that. The idea that the businessmen who lived in states that had codes that say you have to pay everybody for you. They had a code that said you got to pay everybody who worked for you. You cannot have anybody not work for you. Those men said, damn, I'm losing because guess what? These jokers down there don't got to pay.
They got free labor.
In the factory, this, that. If I could just have what they have, no. And since I can't have what they have, I don't want them to have it. So we need to outlaw the means for them to be able to do that. Now, does that have anything to do with the humanity of the people who was close to the thing? Maybe, who knows? But we know initially it was about what I can't have that these jokers down there have, that code. We sanctioned by a code and they not. I want them to have the same code as me. And that we see that still some of that today. Listen, I'm just telling you, we didn't talk about this because we didn't meet last week about the Super Bowl. And the controversy about Negro national anthem. But only the first verse. Not the whole thing. Just like the national anthem. They don't sing the whole thing. They just sing the intro. And there's a reason why these things represent something. Now, we don't explain to our kids, our kids will look at this and say, look, we are included. The Super Bowl says we're all one people, all together. The problem with that is that's not true because if it was true, Kaepernick would probably have been playing in the Super Bowl. I'm just keeping it, just being honest. And I ain't Kaepernick fan, but I'm just saying, don't hiss in my eye and tell me it's rain because that's not what it is. It's not water. That's urine.
Yeah.
I can tell because it's burning. Water usually clear out the burning. It's burning my eye. So
yeah. The fact of the matter is, like I said, the South was kicking the North behind. And to the point that they were actually going to secede from the United States anyway, because they didn't need the United States. They were making so much money that they did not need it. And that little manufacturing that North was doing, they could ship that over to another country to England and get that stuff done.
Right.
That's a long. North had to get them.
You said you bring up a really good thing for us just to kick around. This is the kick ball around. We just kick ball around. But the idea that a lot of times we forget and we talk about this all the time. And I think Lana brings this up that we spend so much hyper focus on us in our box that we don't look at the whole world. Like in the history, we only concern ourselves with American history, not world history. It's empowering. You cannot imagine how empowering it is for us to teach our kids world history, because then you would teach your kids that the Moors who came from Africa traveled to Europe and taught Europeans all types of hygiene and safe practices. They traveled over here and over to the new land that allegedly Christopher Columbus found, but they had already found it and had already been over here. You would learn about that. You would learn about Musa Massa and how he destroyed the economic system on his pilgrimage to Mecca. And most people say, well, how did he do that? Well, he did that again. I guess we're going into a Black History moment. I guess we're still in February, so I guess it's good. How did he destroy the community? Why would he give away all this gold? That don't make sense. Because he was a Muslim. He was on a pilgrimage. And during that time on the pilgrimage, what you do is you give, because giving is a better blessing than to take. So the whole trip, everywhere he went, he gave people the one thing they had abundance of, and they had no value. This is the other part. They had abundance of material that they had no value. They didn't have it as a value. It was just a regular resource, just like a piece of tree was.
Yeah.
They had a whole bunch of it, and it was nice and it was shiny. And they could craft jewelry and things out of it. So they was then they traveled on from Mali to all the way to Mecca. They just handed out stuff. Hey, here's the stuff we giving on the pilgrimage. That destroyed the economic system in Europe because trying to hold on to one little piece of coin. Here go the man out here giving people chunks. But again, that's the difference of us knowing a little box history and tearing the box open and knowing all the history. We feel a lot. I mean, you can't tell me nothing. I'm always on my courage, Jack, because I believe that I'm supposed to, Jack. I walk around here like Mr. T if I want to, because it's my heritage to do so.
Correct. Well, that's the thing about it. Again, there's no embarrassment. Embarrassment and empowerment can't exist together, right? Like oil and water. It just don't mix. I mean, if you were raised with a particular empowerment, it'd be almost impossible for embarrassment to dwell in you. You understand? That's the only reason empowerment or embarrassment actually exists, is to root out the empowerment in you, right? And so if you don't know too much about you anyway, you understand? I guess it would be easy to embarrass you.
Right.
And so, when like the schoolyard things we used to say, I mean, we used to just get off just out of just pure ignorance of calling each other Black. And even all of us was Black. And so we called each other Black and then put adjectives on it. And so with that particular thing, that's just the ignorance and not the science, or basically the science that we were lacking, and the lack of studies that were in the curriculum that we were engaged in the public schools that we actually attended. And so if the curriculums showed us more embarrassment than empowerment, and that's just how we conduct ourselves. So I don't even blame us as children, you understand, for being the ignorant beings that we were and not getting from the schools what we needed to truly empower ourselves.
Absolutely.
So I understand that. I understand and remember, I'm not about positivity, I'm about practicality. And so I'm about the pros and the cons of history, and particularly world's history. Because when you find out that, right, back to Ron's point, if you lock yourself in an American box, particularly as a Black person, then you'll think racism is the greatest injustice in the world. But the truth of the matter is far from the truth, because sexism is the greatest injustice in the world. But the greatest injustice in the world is not even sexism. The greatest injustice in the world is classism. You understand? Again, there's more women than Black people, and guess what? There's more poor people than women. And so and I love the way LJ break it down, because at the end of the day, you got to get that 30-second science as if you were a walking McDonald's commercial. You understand? And that's all I want to say. So I love the way that you don't have no ignorant brothers on here, and you have very enlightening brothers from all walks of life, from the streets to the suites, and we can't be afraid to always stay connected.
You know, it's also interesting in when you look at the census, because if you are from the Middle East, which is actually Africa, that we all know, it's not the Middle East. When you come to America and you have to claim your ethnic status, you have to claim white. Okay, and you don't have a choice. And you might think about, well, why would they think about that? Why would you have to claim white? The reason why is the same reason that they changed it from Africa to the Middle East, is because Jesus Christ is from there. Okay? If you say that all of a sudden that Jesus Christ was other than white, you got a problem on your hands.
Mhm.
So let's just change the whole narrative and just call it the Middle East and where he's from, and everyone from there is white. And everyone knows that's not true. But that's the way they change things around, the twist and turn thing. Because how are you going to enslave someone that you worship? That's crazy. Now that's true insanity.
Well,
So
that's the same insanity that I think about all the time. Is the question of who was the persons that and who did the things they did to Jesus? Who was they? No one ever acknowledged who it's like a strange mystery.
That's the white folks.
But we can't ever see a visual. There's nobody, like I said, there's nobody owning that. No one is saying that. We the people who did this to Jesus because this is why we did it. You don't get any people ever own it. And I think that goes back to what we're talking about with the whole Ron DeSantis thing. No one wants to be the person that has to own the bad thing. It's better if we don't even know who those people were. We just say that people did something to Jesus. Somebody did something, I think Black people did something to themselves, actually. More important thing. And so because again, it's an easy narrative. And then it doesn't have to be a point where you ever have to, as I would say, that this is a Christian nation. The most important thing that we need to do, and we say all the time, is repent. The biggest problem with our country is we haven't repented for some of our biggest sins. We haven't repented for what we've done to, like Lana said, to poor people. We don't repent for it. We don't repent to what we do to women. And we don't repent what we do to minorities. Mainly Black. When I mean minorities, I mean Black people. So there's no repent, but the biggest part, the way to get to the king is through your repentance and being able to acknowledge him as the one who takes on your sins. So it's just always interesting how this turns, it gets fuzzy, man. It gets fuzzy-duzzy, and it becomes very convenient for people to say stuff like, oh, we don't want you to be woke. I don't even know what the hell woke is. I was asleep. Most working class people ain't woke because we trying to sleep before we go back to work, Doc.
I wanted to touch in what Lawrence was saying earlier about, I think most people can really contemplate the difference between race and ethnicity, right? I was filling out something the other day and it asked, race is human, right? Human race, but then you got to talk about Caucasian, Asian, Black, right? There's demographic groups. There's a breakdown of how you are allowed to identify yourself in legal paperwork and legal documents. And I think a lot of people get confused in that. Well, I'm Colombian. That's not race. That's not a code. Like there's a different breakdown of that. And I think culturally we lose that, or we're not taught that. Definitely not in the school system. There's no heritage. There's no cultural empowerment in education, right? There's American history and whatever we choose to teach you regionally, right? Because I know that education system in South Florida or in Florida is different than Nebraska, per se, where they don't deal with cultural differences from Cuba, Haitian, Dominicans, and different diasporas of cultural people. I think that's a huge disconnect when you start talking about how do we move and how do we think. And then just going back to what Lightborn said, God code, ultimately is what are the moral compass and rules that we're following to guide ourselves through life. So, great conversation, gentlemen. Thank you.
You know what? I'm glad you guys, and Ron just really eloquently described the God code in its totality. Let me say something about, and I haven't spoke about Ron DeSantis publicly. I spoke about him privately between my wife and our little private conversation. And then again, I didn't speak about him at all, even then, because if people don't say something or they're not saying something I need to hear, it's chances are I'm not listening. You understand? or they're not saying something worth hearing. But I can say this about Ron DeSantis, and I'm not using, I believe in God and everything, and I believe this is what he got to understand about the God code. Because I observed something about him that he don't remember about himself. I'm like, you ran a campaign on something, right? I said, you ran a campaign and you got voted in on something that you failed to show. You know what that word is? Back to your repentance thing. He ran his campaign on mercy. And let me say this, I'm like, because I paid very good, good attention to your campaign. I'm like, you ran a very successful campaign when it came to your wife cancer and her remission of cancer. And you ran that campaign saying how good God was and the miracles of God and the mercy that God showed to your wife, which, and if he showed it to your wife, he showed it to you as a husband, and he showed it to your children as their, for them keeping their mother around so she can be there for him. And so that campaign of mercy gets you voted back in as governor, which is another G code. And as that G code, oh, there's another G code that goes along with that mercy. It's called grace. Grace is just simply time. And God, sometimes grace and mercy, where it couples itself together, because grace is the time that gives you the opportunity to be merciful. Now you ran and you got in on mercy. And when you got in on mercy and God showed your family mercy, you became governor and showed immigrants. You showed people of color, poor people, and everybody in the world no mercy at all, even though your whole campaign was built on the mercy that God showed your family. Anything that you do publicly, and I can guarantee you, if you do it publicly, God will chastise you publicly. And so this is going to, again, I said it about Donald Trump, and I said it for Ron DeSantis because he wants to be a Donald Trump. I'm like, you got to understand that God, yes, he chastised Donald Trump greatly. January 6th was nothing but a chastisement. And he didn't have to use other people to do that. He used his own people to do it. Now, if he can do that to Donald Trump and you want to be a greater Donald Trump, what you think God can do to you? Because one thing about it is factual. I'm like, man, you don't play with mercy. You don't take mercy and drop immigrants off in the coldest, on the coldest day, in the coldest weather, and leaving them out there homeless. Instead of taking the money, what money was designed for, to show charity, you used it to project a greedy opportunity for yourself. And you really don't believe you're going to reap that. I'm like, I'm telling you straight up, I'm like, I feel sad, not even sad, I feel scared for Ron DeSantis, not for what man will do to him, but what God will do to him. And that's all I have to say about it. Man, it's 8:30. I hit that right on the board.
I was gonna say, listen, well, we might get shut down. Listen, let us cut off here because we might get shut down because now that's your turn. But listen, we talking about G codes, and governor is one of the G codes. So everything was in content. Everything we talked about tonight had the G in front of it. We just put a code behind it. I would like to thank everybody for joining us tonight. Again, like, share, subscribe to us. We're here every Tuesday. We are on every Wednesday, private Zoom meeting. Tomorrow we'll be live at the Arts and Cultural Centers in Hollywood, Florida, 1650 Harrison Street, Hollywood, Florida. Check us out. We started promptly at 6 o'clock with dinner, and then we got a dynamic session for the fathers that come out tomorrow. One that takes me back to Carter Park. I already said it's gonna take. I already know it's gonna take me back to Carter Park. With that being said, gentlemen, repeat after me. I am.
I am.
And
I am.
I am.
I am a man of honor.
I am
a man of
honor.
I am.
I am.
I am.
I am.
I
I
am.
am.
I am a man of courage.
I
I
am.
am
I
a man
am a
of
man of courage.
I am.
I
I
am.
am.
I am.
I
I
am.
am.
Man of respect.
I
I
am
am
a man of
I
respect.
say that I am.
I
I
am.
am.
That you are.
You are.
God.
That we are.
We are
Yeah.
God.
Championship
championship
father.
Oh, Castro. I said Castro got it.
Castro coming from the title, huh?
This is the way we show love to our families and our kids. And we'd like to thank you for joining us, and we'll see you here again next week on Fatherhood Talks. Good night.
All right, brother.
gentlemen.
Y'all have a great evening.